Welcome to Clandestine Cases, where every story unravels a new enigma waiting to be solved. Join us as we dive into Miss Marple and the Portrait That Never Blinked, a fan-made story created to celebrate the charm and brilliance of Agatha Christie's legendary detective. We'd love to have you with us on this thrilling journey. Share your thoughts, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if you spot any errors, do let us know. Your feedback helps us bring you even better mysteries in the future. Chapter 1. A Portrait of Deceit. The rain battered against the tall oak trees surrounding Pemberton Manor, its relentless drumming echoing through the dimly lit corridors like the mournful tones of a funeral bell. Miss Jane Marple, bundled snugly in her woolen shawl, stood at the foot of the grand staircase. Her sharp eyes darted towards the study door, which was conspicuously ajar. Though the evening was steeped in shadows, the flickering light of a solitary lamp spilled out like a warning. Such a dreadful tragedy, Mrs. Claridge had murmured earlier in the drawing room, her voice heavy with disbelief. Lady Pemberton found dead in her own study, locked from the inside. What manner of devilry is this? Miss Marple's thoughts danced over the peculiarities of the evening. Clutching her knitting, she had listened intently to the whispers of the village. An illustrious hostess, Lady Pemberton had been both an enigma and a pillar in the community. The sudden demise felt as shocking as a clap of thunder on an otherwise peaceful night. Miss Marple approached the study, the faint glow revealing the outline of a heavily framed portrait that dominated the far wall. A painting of Lady Pemberton herself, captured in a moment of regal grace. Yet the expression conveyed by the oil on canvas was that of a woman, cloaked in worry, her eyes staring out as though she were holding secrets too potent to be spoken. "You might well blame me," the artist had remarked, grinning impishly. "Her soul feels trapped, doesn't it? Just like this manor." Shoving aside such unsettling thoughts, she cautiously entered the room, a shiver trailing down her spine. The air felt different. There was an expectation in the atmosphere, as though even the shadows held their breath. The furniture, draped in heavy mahogany, stood immaculate, untouched by the chaos that had just unfurled. And yet the desk was a different story. Papers scattered wide, like a flock of startled birds taking flight. An open ledger lay conspicuously among them. But it wasn't the disarray that seized her attention. A glass in the corner of the room caught the light, sparkling, innocent, yet ominously empty. Miss Marple narrowed her eyes and surveyed the room with deliberation. No sign of struggle, nothing but silence and the quiet trickle of rain. "Ah, Miss Marple," Inspector Craddock's voice broke through her thoughts. He stepped into the study, followed by the sound of muted footsteps from an officer. "I trust you are not here to disturb the crime scene." "Good evening, Inspector," she replied, her voice laced with the soft irony of their frequent exchanges. "I merely observe, as is my habit." She gestured to the ledger, where a hurried handwriting struck her as unnatural. "Tell me, was this Lady Pemberton's handwriting?" Craddock leaned forward, revealing the telltale whirls and curves of a practiced penmanship. "It is, indeed," he admitted, glancing back at the papers cluttering the desk. "Interesting," Miss Marple mused, her mind racing. Lady Pemberton was markedly precise. I cannot imagine she would neglect to return to tidy her desk if it contained anything of importance. The inspector sighed, frustration seeping through his crisp demeanor. "What's troubling you, then?" "Indeed," she mused, tilting her head. "Since the door was locked from the inside, how did the murderer escape? And why was Lady Pemberton seemingly anxious in her last moments? Perhaps she was hiding something, a guest list of unsavory characters. He nodded thoughtfully toward the blur of hastily scrawled names circling a particular date. Miss Marple's eyes twinkled with intrigue. Or perhaps someone invited in, under pretense of friendship. Perhaps, Craddock conceded, furrowing his brow. Yet, who could have entered without the knowledge of Lady Pemberton herself? Her trusted guests, she said, her mind collecting images of the evening's attendees, both familiar and strange. The artist, for instance, who is nothing if not friend and foe, Mr. Thomas Waverley, who owed her money, and Mrs. Gold, an overzealous admirer of her fortune. Money, Craddock echoed, mulling it over. They all had motives, but it was a distinguished dinner party. Such behavior does not fit the decorum. Behavior, Inspector, is often a thin veil over a person's true nature, Miss Marple replied, her voice a low whisper. Her mind raced, piecing together the richer tapestry of the evening. She could see Clara Gold's eyes glinting with ambition, hear Mr. Waverley's voice cutting through the pleasantries, and the artist's smirk, draped in artistic privilege. They would all be interviewed. Moving silently, she returned to the portrait and the accusatory glare captured within. I wonder about her affairs, particularly with those whom she allowed into her life. Miss Marple murmured, fingers trailing lightly across the frame. There's more here than meets the eye. What do you mean, Inspector? Craddock urged. Be mindful of what you notate, Inspector. Miss Marple's knuckles brushed over the glass of the empty tumbler. Absences tell a tale. A lady does not simply have an empty glass unless the drink within was stolen, or perhaps soiled. At that moment, a crash resounded from somewhere beyond the study. Startled, Miss Marple straightened, her heart speeding with urgency. We mustn't delay. Where do you suppose it came from? He asked, a hint of dread in his voice. Knowing but not wishing to voice it, she replied simply, the truth may be lurking just beyond the doors, or within our very hearts. And as the echoes of the crash reverberated down the hallway, Miss Marple couldn't shake the feeling that they were indeed being watched, not only by those interested in Lady Pemberton's estate, but by the painted eyes of the portrait behind her. Chapter 2. The Letter That Arrived Too Late. The rain, relentless and unforgiving, continued its serenade against the windows of Pemberton Manor like a sob for a fallen queen. Miss Marple, still shaken from the previous evening's chaos, felt a renewed tremble of unease as she surveyed the study once more. The remnants of Lady Pemberton's life swirled around her. The dusty bookshelf crammed with forgotten tomes, the elegant rug bearing the scars of time, and the darkened portrait looming, overspread with a silence that seemed conspiratorial. It was then a sharp knock on the study door echoed through the dimly lit space, startling Miss Marple from her reverie. Inspector Craddock stood at the threshold, a sealed letter clutched tightly in his hand. Miss Marple, you'd best see this. It just arrived, he said, eyebrow arched, as if the dawn carried more foreboding than illumination. She took the envelope, the crisp parchment, crackling ominously in her fingers. A surge of adrenaline coursed through her as she turned it over. The smudged ink bore an unfamiliar handwriting, its curves betraying an urgency tempered by hesitation. It seems our deceased lady has reared her head from beyond the grave, she remarked dryly, glancing at the inspector. What do you believe it contains? Craddock mused, his eyes narrowing as he joined her in the center of the room, the flickering lamp illuminating both their features. Let's unravel the thread, shall we? Miss Marple suggested, her voice barely a whisper. With decisive grace, she broke the seal and unfolded the letter slowly, savoring the tension that filled the air. Each carefully penned word danced before her eyes, revealing a tale steeped in deceit. Dear Lady Pemberton, as the clock strikes midnight, I can no longer bear the weight of silence. Your reluctance to confront the truth of the past has sown seeds of danger that could lead to ruin. You must know that I was bequeathed knowledge that could unravel all you cherish. Secrets do not rest. As they say, rust does not sleep, and neither shall I. I urge you to meet me before it's too late. Yours, in trust, a friend of a darker nature. Miss Marple's heart raced, the implications behind the ink amplifying the gravity of the letter. A scandal that could unravel the family indeed, she murmured, her thoughts in turmoil. Inspector, this correspondence is nearly prophetic in light of Lady Pemberton's demise. Indeed, Craddock replied, his tone tinged with skepticism. But we must consider, could it be mere trickery? A ruse devised by someone to cover their own tracks? For a letter to arrive hours after her death, it is either remarkably fortuitous or reprehensibly planned. Miss Marple countered, pondering. There's a connection here, and it speaks of urgency that Lady Pemberton must have sensed. But what was the truth she dared not confront? With clear intention, she imagined the web of relationships surrounding Lady Pemberton, an illustrious circle laden with hidden motives. Inspector, may we examine the address? Perhaps the sender can lend context to this mystery. The inspector took the letter again, glancing at the top left corner where an inked address lay. It's from a Mrs. Agnes Whitlock of Ravenswood, he muttered, a frown forming on his brow. I've seen that name before, but I can't place it. Ah, yes, the milliner, Miss Marple exclaimed, a spark of recognition illuminating her eyes. She was known for her extravagant creations. I remember now. She catered to the elite of our village, particularly Lady Pemberton. Yet why would she pen such disquieting matters? It suggests a depth we have yet to uncover. Craddock's expression shifted from curiosity to unease. Perhaps we ought to pay a visit to Mrs. Whitlock, then. If she harbored secrets important enough to wager with a life, it's time we shine a light on her motives. Let us not be hasty, Miss Marple admonished gently. The old woman knew the weightiness of such accusations. It is equally vital to question whether the letter itself could be a smokescreen, a well-crafted distraction amidst these shadows. As if on cue, the thunder rumbled outside, sending a shiver down her spine, as if the very heavens conspired with the drama unfolding within the manor. This letter could drive us down paths tangled with falsehoods or illuminate the obscure. In either case, we must tread thoroughly. Their conversation was abruptly interrupted by the screech of an unforgiving fork, the sound of a concealed latch disengaging at the door. Both Miss Marple and Inspector Craddock turned sharply as Clara Gold, a guest of the dinner party and Lady Pemberton's longtime admirer, stood there, her pallid demeanor contrasting sharply against the vibrant colors of her attire. Inspector, Miss Marple, I overheard you discussing a letter. I must implore you to find the truth. Clara's voice quivered, a tempest of emotions brewing beneath her polished facade. Clara, dear, Miss Marple replied soothingly, this evening has been most disquieting. Your frantic entrance speaks of feelings perhaps better confined. What fills your thoughts? With a tremble, Clara clutched her throat, her eyes glistening with tears. The milliner. She has no business, whatever she threatens. How could Lady Pemberton have distrusted her? She was merely devoted. The true urgency behind Clara's words struck Miss Marple as powerfully as the storm outside. "Then perhaps we should summon Mrs. Whitlock post-haste," she replied, her mind racing. "But first, Clara, tell me, what exactly is it that you fear?" But before she received a reply, the power in the room shifted imperceptibly. Miss Marple's gaze shifted to the door, where shadows danced ominously, elongated by the flickering light. It was not merely rain that filled the silence. The air vibrated with the weight of unspoken truths. The painted eyes of Lady Pemberton seemed to gleam with an urgency that was more than memory, a spectral reminder that time indeed was slipping away. "We must act quickly," Miss Marple said, her mind piecing together the fragments of a mystery more convoluted than she anticipated. Somewhere within whispered secrets lay the truth, and they were dangerously close to unearthing a revelation that would leave none untouched. "Indeed, let's find Mrs. Whitlock at once," Craddock affirmed, urgency in his voice. Yet unknown to them all, a pair of eyes followed their every move. Ghost of the past lurked behind the veil, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal itself. And without warning, the truth began to spiral dangerously toward the light. Or so Miss Marple hoped. As they prepared to step deeper into the unknown, one thought echoed in their minds. Some truths are woven with blood, and secrets that refuse to stay buried. Chapter 3. The Last Guest at the Midnight Ball. Rain lashed against the windows of Pemberton Manor, the rhythmic patter echoing in the silent hallways like muffled sobs. The remnants of the grand midnight ball now lay in disarray, a scattering of elegant gowns hanging lifelessly, crumpled invitations littering the floor, and a faint perfume that lingered like a ghost of laughter. Miss Marple stood alone at the foot of the grand staircase, her heart heavy with the weight of unspent words and unanswered questions. In the chilling aftermath of Lady Pemberton's murder, the dimly lit corners of the manor bristled with unspoken fears. The guests had departed one by one, casting nervous glances behind them as they clutched their coats tight, fearful of the shadows lurking just beyond the threshold. Yet amidst the sea of anxious chatter and muffled cries, Miss Marple realized with chilling clarity that one attendee was absent from the mass exodus, the charismatic artist, Mr. Thomas Waverley. She had noted his vivacious presence at dinner, and now it seemed he had vanished, slipping from the estate like smoke through fingers. "Miss Marple," the voice of Inspector Craddock broke her reverie, his frame emerging from the gloomy shadows of the drawing-room. He looked as though he had aged a decade in the single day since the tragedy, his brow furrowed with worry. "Have you seen Waverley? He left the ball immediately after, well, after everything." "I regret to say that I have not," Miss Marple replied, her voice measured. "But it seems odd he would depart so hurriedly. The man's temperament often danced with the drama of his art. I would have expected him to linger just a little longer, maybe even to gather inspiration from the chaos of the moment." "True," Craddock mused, crossing his arms, "but it is far from unusual for a man of his nature to retreat from the spotlight after a fright like this." "Perhaps," Miss Marple replied thoughtfully, her eyes narrowing as the flickering candlelight cast long shadows on the walls. "Yet his absence serves only to amplify the intrigue surrounding this entire affair. Shall we investigate?" With a shared sense of urgency, they ventured deeper into the labyrinth of the manor, each step echoing like a phantom in the silence. Miss Marple intended to search every nook and cranny where secrets might linger like the scent of forgotten roses. But first, she turned her attention to the luxurious parlor where the last moments of joy had transformed into quiet despair. As she entered the room, something caught her eye. A wearily crumpled invitation, fluttering gently under the coffee table. She knelt to retrieve it, unfolding the delicate paper. The embossed lettering glimmered faintly in the dim light, revealing a list of names. Yet, as she examined it closely, her heart quickened at the title printed at the top. The last guests at the midnight ball. "Inspector, look," she exclaimed, extending the invitation toward him. "These names, they are, if I'm not mistaken, each and every invitee present last night, including one notable absence." Craddock squinted at the paper. "And whom do you suspect? Waverley, the artist? He would surely come back for such an illustrious event." "Perhaps," Miss Marple said slowly, turning the invitation over. "But if we delve deeper, this item may hold more secrets than mere attendance. The hand that penned these names bears resemblance to that of Lady Pemberton's. I believe she may have meticulously outlined her guests not just for the evening's merriment, but to keep an eye on them, suspecting some unspoken tension among her friends." "Are you implying there was more to the gathering than mere social grace?" "I am suggesting that perhaps someone at that table loomed larger than the others in terms of motive," she said, her mind racing back to the dinner table. "And an artist of Waverley's repute would hardly shy away from the drama that enveloped Pemberton's life. We must discover whether or not he had spoken to anyone about displeasure or conflict over the evening." Just then, the door creaked open slowly, a chilling gust of wind sending shivers down their spines. Clara Gold stood there, her delicate frame almost swallowed by the doorway. "Miss Marple, Inspector," she exclaimed breathlessly, "have you seen Mr. Waverley? He disappeared without a word, and I fear he is in danger." Her eyes darted about the dim room, darting nervously as if expecting shadows to leap at her. "Why would you believe that, Clara?" Craddock pressed, moving toward her, cautiously. Clara's countenance shifted, her fear morphing into something more poignant. "Because I overheard him speaking with Lady Pemberton just before the evening's tragedy. They were arguing." "Arguing, you say?" Miss Marple interjected, her voice steady. "Do you recall the topic?" "I didn't hear every word, but it was about her painting. She had commissioned him for a piece to commemorate something he seemed reticent to disclose, and she became formidable, insisting—" Clara's voice quavered slightly, "that it contained truths too dark to unveil." A sudden realization spread through Miss Marple's mind. Waverley's art had taken a life of its own, perhaps entangling him in more than just the canvas. So, as was Lady Pemberton's fate, the burdens of the past could weigh heavy in this present turmoil. Craddock's expression turned grim. "Then let's waste no time. He must be found, and quickly, Miss Marple. The shadows lengthen in this foul night." Noting the urgency within his tone, Miss Marple turned with purpose, keen to track down Waverley before the night swallowed him whole. But just as she reached the threshold of the parlour, a flicker of movement caught her attention near the portrait of Lady Pemberton, its darkened aura now seeming eerily alive. "Inspector, look." She gestured toward the portrait, where a small note now lay propped against its base, unnoticed until that moment. It bore the unmistakable scrawl of Waverley himself, and her heart raced. As she reached for it, the tension in the room thickened. In that very instant, she knew that whatever it revealed could unravel the very tangle of threads they were desperate to decipher. The painted eyes of Lady Pemberton bore witness, and as Miss Marple unfolded the note, she sensed the dark enigmas entwined within the midst of their inquiries were about to erupt forth into undeniable clarity or chaos. With trembling fingers, She read the cryptic lines scrawled upon the paper, "A lighthouse amid the storm." And suddenly, she understood. The darkness had only just begun to awaken. Chapter 4. The Will That Was Never Signed. The rain lashed down in relentless sheets, blurring the world outside Pemberton Manor into a dusky haze. Inside, the air felt thick with tension, each guest's presence a stifled breath in the aftermath of tragedy. It was against this oppressive backdrop that Miss Marple stood, her gaze transfixed upon the heavy oak table, where an ominous stack of papers lay waiting. The late Lady Pemberton's will had been called into the light. "Unbelievable!" Clara Gold exclaimed, her voice slicing through the stillness like a thunderclap. Her hands quivered, the stack of paper shaking in sympathy. "How can this be? A mere forgery?" Lady Pemberton, who prided herself on propriety, would never have signed such a thing. Miss Marple shifted slightly, her woolen shawl drawing tighter around her shoulders as though braced for a sudden drop in temperature. She had long learned that the very whiff of the scandalous could stir the most genteel of souls. "Indeed, my dear Clara," she replied softly, taking a careful step closer to the table, her gaze focused on the documents which seemed to absorb the dim light. "But the particulars of this will demand our utmost scrutiny. Forged or not, the implications are grave." Inspector Craddock lingered near the door, his brow furrowed deeper than usual. "We've encountered nothing but duplicity since our arrival," he declared, stepping into the room and casting a critical eye on the papers. "What could the lady possibly want from her heirs that would prompt this mess?" Miss Marple studied Clara's face, the flickering emotion lingering there. "Fear, Inspector, is often the breeding ground for deception. It may well be, or about to be, a concern that these terms might not be truly reflective of Lady Pemberton's wishes." "Then, who would want to forge such a wretched thing?" Craddock demanded, crossing his arms tightly. "Someone with nothing to lose or everything to gain." Miss Marple's voice dripped with insight, and she leaned a bit closer, her keen eyes scanning the handwriting on the document. "What language wraps around this forgery is critical. It speaks not only of Lady Pemberton, but perhaps of how she perceived those who surrounded her." Murmurs of discomfort rippled through the room as Clara clenched her fists. "You mean to suggest someone here had the audacity to manipulate Lady Pemberton?" "Not merely manipulation, my dear Clara," Miss Marple reiterated, holding up the will and examining the unique flourishes of the handwriting. "What I see is the desperate grasp of a writer imitating another's voice. The absence of her familiar flourishes suggests a hurried hand." She paused, letting her words sink in like a somber note across the somnolent room. This was likely written in great anxiety and without Mrs. Pemberton's consent. At this, Mrs. Claridge interjected, her tone barely hiding a tremor of indignation. "Nonsense! Such an act against Lady Pemberton. Who would have the gall? She was adored, and dare I say, feared by all. It is often those closest to us we deem worthy of our trust who tread most dangerously," Miss Marple replied, her expression tranquil amid the storm brewing among them. As if the thunder outside responded to her words, the old manor creaked ominously, shadows lengthening around them. Inspector Craddock peered warily at the startled faces before him. "We will require all guests to submit their handwriting for analysis. I will not entertain any covert movements until we know for certain who attempted this egregious deceit." "Sir, I assure you no such barbarity exists in this household," Clara protested, eyes flashing. "We are here mourning, not conspiring against one another." Yet grief often clouds the judgment, Miss Marple interjected gently. Let us not forget, the widow in mourning might wish to conceal more than her loss, perhaps secrets that even... A sudden panic-laden cry echoed from the far side of the drawing room, interrupting Miss Marple's words. No, not that. Mrs. Gold's hand trembled as she clutched a silver candlestick, her face pale as a ghost. Someone's taken it. What have you lost? Craddock approached her immediately, his voice firm, yet tinged with a knowing realization of worry. The ledger. The account ledger from the study. Clara's eyes widened, and she rushed toward the study door, urgency blending with the rain's drumming. We may establish motive, intentions, or even who Lady Pemberton considered as her sole heir. Then we must move quickly. Miss Marple shared a glance with Craddock, their silent communication a testament to the depth of their shared understanding. But where would such an object be concealed? Circling around the ornate furniture, her thoughts spiraled like the swirling mists outside. Clara, you mentioned overhearing the argument between Lady Pemberton and Waverley. Was there something you found odd about that conversation? The artist was clearly agitated, Clara recalled, her voice softer. Lady Pemberton demanded something he seemed reluctant to share. An arrangement. Something he owed her. My God, did she dictate the will? A delicate murmur rippled through the guests as they listened, weighing her words. Miss Marple's mind reeled, racing through the intricate web of relationships, the desperate artist tethered to the socialite in death's absence. Then we must investigate Mr. Waverley's studio. Or rather, what's left of it, she proposed, her conviction growing stronger, fueled by visions of unanswered queries. Your intuition, as always, is remarkable, Miss Marple, Craddock accorded, though reservations simmered under his gaze. But time slips away sharply, and so do our witnesses. With purposeful direction, the group pressed toward the study, where the shadows grew thicker, with revelations smoldering beneath the facades of trust. Yet, as they entered, the room sparkled with a renewed potential for clarity amidst the enveloping darkness. Miss Marple's fingers brushed against papers, and she began her search as the others crowded nervously. Moments passed with mounting tension, and then suddenly, Miss Marple felt something, a distinct misalignment in the desk drawer. Aha, she exclaimed, scattering papers in haste. Inspector, quick, look here. The drawer yielded a hidden compartment, revealing not only shimmering gems, scattered like secrets, but also a small, tattered notebook. Leaves of paper fluttered open with Miss Marple's frantic movements. Notes filled with phrases of regret and desire, each word tearing through the delicate backdrop of Lady Pemberton's life, revealing a story hungering for the light. Here, she breathed, holding it up to the dimness. But before she could decipher more, Clara cried out again, indicating the portrait's gaze splashed across the canvas. The painted eyes of Lady Pemberton seemed to blink, urgently guiding them toward deeper truths, yet unspoken. Time is running out, Clara warned, her voice rising, anxiety sharpening the edges of her features. Then let's grasp these shadows before they consume us, Miss Marple called, her fingers brushing against the tattered notebook, ready to unearth the final, shrouded whispers of their late hostess, as the echoes of the storm outside cast them further into the tangled weave of deceit that awaited below. And as Miss Marple took a deep breath, the room shifted, the distance in her pursuit of truth stretching toward dark and unbroken horizons, pulling them all into a game of wills that none would escape unscathed. Chapter 5. The Vanishing Heir. The storm raged outside Pemberton Manor, rain hammering against leaded windows, like a relentless percussionist, drowning out the faded echoes of last night's revelry. Inside, however, an even more hostile atmosphere thrummed with tension and uncertainty as fragments of solemn conversations interwove with crackling whispers of fear. Miss Marple had positioned herself strategically in the drawing room, the soft glow of the lamp cutting through the crackling shadows. Just as the gathering gloom threatened to extinguish every flicker of hope, a scream pierced the air. "Clara, what is it?" Miss Marple's voice was steady, though adrenaline surged through her veins. She turned just in time to see Clara Gold rush into the room, her complexion pale as the waning moon. "It's Thomas. He's missing. I cannot find him anywhere." Clara's voice quivered, the distress palpable in the usually composed woman. "Missing?" Miss Marple echoed, rising abruptly from her seat. The freshness of alarm filled the air as Inspector Craddock, who had been poring over the remnants of Lady Pemberton's will, straightened, his eyes narrowing. "Indeed, I last saw him in the study," Clara blurted, glancing toward the doorway with a growing trepidation. "He seemed troubled, and I assumed he had gone upstairs to be alone, but—" Her voice trailed off, a shadow passing across her features. "But now, there's no sign of him." As the urgency heightening within the room began to sink into a tangible sensation, Miss Marple's mind raced through recent conversations and the underlying currents of tension among the guests. Waverley's playful charm had concealed a tempest of emotion, and perhaps those emotions had taken flight, like autumn leaves, vanishing from the manor altogether. "Did anyone hear the door?" Miss Marple inquired, her gaze sharp as she examined Clara's demeanour. "Were there footsteps leading away from the study?" "Not that I remember," Clara replied haltingly, her fingers ringing together nervously. "But oh, Miss Marple, I fear something dreadful has happened. I overheard whispers of betrayal and jealousy, and there was talk of inheritance, that made the air thick with suspicion." "Betrayal indeed," Miss Marple mused, peering intently into Clara's anxious expression. "Might I remind you that an heir's motive to depart might stem from a hidden agenda? His art, his debts, his circumstances, they all intertwine." At that, Craddock stepped forward, his brow furrowed as he began to piece together the evolving puzzle. "If he has truly vanished, it might indicate something larger at play than mere emotional turmoil. We need to search the house. All rooms," he ordered. The inspector and Miss Marple exchanged assured glances, and she took the lead, her experienced intuition guiding her through the winding hallways where shadows danced like wraiths. A sense of foreboding grew with each step as they traversed the ornate yet suffocating atmosphere of a manor, the air tinged with secrets whispered beneath the layers of grief. With each passing moment, the tension squeezed around them, like the coils of a tightening noose. Clara followed closely, her silent anxiety gnawing at the fabric of her resolve. They entered the study, its opulence immediately dulled by the presence of dread. Papers lay scattered, but they looked different now. Each one bore the unmistakable mark of Lady Pemberton's meticulousness. Yet the warmth of her hand had vanished, leaving a hollow chill. "Inspector, can you remind me the contents of the ledgers we uncovered?" Miss Marple requested. "Those that the late Lady Pemberton protected so fiercely." "Yes, financial discrepancies stacked against her," he muttered, rifling through the documents on the desk. But they were incomplete, gaps that hinted at some unsteady arrangements, worth tracing back to Waverley himself, I'd wager. But now, his words faltered, as a muffled noise caused them to whirl toward the closed door, The soft sound of footsteps shuffling across the upper floor sent their hearts racing with renewed urgency. Miss Marple's instincts screamed that time was slipping away. Across to the landing, she urged, dashing down the ornate winding staircase. Clara followed, the sound of her racing heart mingling with the persistent rain outside. They arrived at the door to Thomas Waverley's private quarters, swinging it wide to find the room empty, save for an overturned easel and paint splattered haphazardly about. "Thomas," Clara called, her voice faltering against the silence. "Please, say something." There was only darkness hovering in the corners, taunting the trio like whispered secrets. Miss Marple moved deeper into the room, her sharp eyes scanning for anything amiss. Just as she approached the window, the shimmering rain catching her attention. A glint near the edge of the easel piqued her interest. "Over here," she cried, kneeling swiftly to grasp a beautifully rendered sketch, a portrait of Lady Pemberton. But it was more than that. An expression of profound sorrow crossed the painted face, almost as if the artist had captured the weight of unspoken truths upon canvas. In the corner, inked into the bottom, scrawled the familiar signature legible to all, but the dates alongside it hadn't passed yet. "Miss Marple, what do you see?" Craddock queried, his voice laden with confusion as he approached. "The dates, Inspector. They are posthumous," she declared, flipping the sketch for them to see clearly. "But more than that, they coincide with the will's amendments that someone forged in her name. It seems Waverley sought to expose that which Lady Pemberton concealed, and now he's vanished." Craddock interrupted ominously. "We must implement a search across the estate. There's no telling what dark paths he may have traversed to evade scrutiny. Not only Waverley's emotion holds weight here, but a truth that lurks like a phantom," Miss Marple said, thoughtfully, her mind racing. Perhaps it was not merely his art that found him lost in a web of deceit, but someone coaxing him toward the shadows where daylight cannot touch. "Clara, what about your relationship with him?" Craddock asked warily. "Is there something more there that would offer context?" But Clara's expression shifted from worry to defensiveness, and her eyes flared with heat. "I respected him as an artist, Inspector, but he was untrustworthy, an unreliable man. And yet, how can I explain this?" Her frustrations melded with despair as her fingers glided over the once vibrant sketch, now shadowy with secrets. "Do you ask because you know something?" Miss Marple prodded gently. "Clara, you must realize such uncertainty could impede your mission here." "Think, Clara," Craddock urged, stepping closer. "He could become a suspect if he is not found soon. For all we know, he may have fled to escape judgment, or worse, to protect someone." A flicker of realization crossed Clara's face, her brow knitting as she grasped the gravity of the unfolding situation. What if... She hesitated. What if Thomas knew something dangerous? As the rain battering against the windows picked up in fervor, Miss Marple could feel the tension clawing at every corner as the pieces began to fit sinisterly together. Suddenly, a memory flashed, unbidden. Lady Pemberton's words echoing in her mind about art containing truths too dark to unveil. "We should search the grounds and stable before the storm deepens. He may still be close, and it will not take long before those outside realize a wind-strewn tale consumes the estate," Miss Marple hastened to declare, her tone cutting through their distracted worry like a sharpened knife. As the urgency settled within them, Clara reluctantly nodded, determination glimmering in her eyes. Craddock flung the door open and motioned for them to follow, while Miss Marple clutched the portrait sketch like a lifeline. The brushstrokes upon the canvas quivered in her hands with each step. Clarity danced on the precipice. Any moment might yield another revelation or tragedy. They sped outside into the tempest, propelled by one thought. They could not lose the heir who had unleashed a storm of treachery and finally unveil the spectres that lingered beneath the haunted beauty of Pemberton Manor. Just as they stepped into the shadows, left by the storm, a chilling shriek erupted beyond the threshold. A figure emerged, drenched and wild-eyed, stumbling into view. It was Waverley, but the frantic look on his face spoke of a truth far darker than they ever imagined. And in that moment, the air quaked with danger, a premonition that led them toward the abyss of their unfolding nightmare. Chapter 6. A Family Divided. The wind wailed outside Pemberton Manor, its damp fingers wrapping around the ancient walls, carrying with it the scent of earth and rain. Inside, tension weighed heavily in the air, thick and choking, making each breath feel like a bear's embrace. Miss Marple stood in the dimly lit hall, a candle flickering in her hand, casting elongated shadows that danced ominously along the paneling. Above her, the portrait of Lady Pemberton hung like a silent guardian. But now, its painted gaze seemed charged with accusation and sorrow. Just moments earlier, a blood-curdling scream had reverberated through the hallowed halls, setting the household into a frenzy. "Clara!" The frantic voice of Inspector Craddock cut through the chaos, drawing Miss Marple's attention. She pivoted on her heel to follow the inspector's trembling limbs. Huddled in the drawing-room was Clara Gold, her once dignified facade now crumbling into panicked fragments. "She's gone. The ledger. It's..." The inspector leaned closer, his eyes narrowing. "Gone? Just moments ago, you spoke of Waverley and the portrait. Now it seems you've misplaced another essential piece. Do you suspect someone among us?" Clara shook her head violently, her hair disheveled. "No, it's not misplaced. I saw someone take it from the study, someone right before everything fell apart. But they vanished. I swear. I saw hands." Her voice broke, and her eyes darted toward the shadows, seeking the malevolent spectre that might be creeping closer. "Miss Marple," Craddock said low, as he turned back to the detective, his face taut with anxiety. "This ledger contained lists of names, financial records, and note after note of transactions that would implicate a few among us as heirs. If someone has dared to take it, we must sink our nets into secrecy before it slips away." Miss Marple considered the girl's words, her mind racing against the backdrop of the storm. "Mrs. Gold, you mentioned seeing someone." She pressed, her voice soft yet steady. "Can you recall any detail, however small? A color, an article of clothing, a flash of anger?" Clara hesitated, her pulse racing, as she wrestled with fragments of the chaotic evening. I only recall a shadow, darker than the rain. A figure lurking near the doorway, eyes flashing towards me in the dim light. It was like staring into a portal of hate," she replied, shuddering. "You felt an emotion strong enough to note a face even in shadows," Miss Marple probed, her mind weaving through the delicate strands of suspicion, tightening like snares. "There's more here than mere theft. It feels rooted in the ashes of familial loyalties." As if conjured, a figure materialized at the edge of the hallway, revealing Verity Pemberton, Lady Pemberton's niece, and one of the recognized heirs. Her presence brought a sharp contrast to Clara's frazzled demeanor. Dressed immaculately, she appeared more composed, though her eyes held the weight of buried rage. "What chaos is this?" she asked evenly, although her voice betrayed a hint of guarded mischief. "And you, Verity?" Craddock cocked an eyebrow. You arrive just after Clara claims the ledger has been taken. Where were you during the commotion? Out, enjoying the night air. It has been a while since I could breathe freely in this oppressive manner, she replied, a smirk curled upon her lips. Isn't it clear? Some seek family ties, while others just wish to float away from its choking embrace. Clara glared at her, fists clenched. How can you take such delight in this situation? Your aunt is gone, and the chaos. I take delight, Verity interrupted, in knowing the truth will come to face us. Nothing is clearer than someone's true nature rising amid a storm. Then let us uncover the truth, shall we? Miss Marple suggested, her voice laced with authority. If the ledger is the key, Craddock remarked, its absence looms like the pall of night, feeding the fires of suspicion. We must separate the vines of this tangled family tree before they choke us. Perhaps I could assist, Verity offered, her tone now purposeful. I had access to the study during the dinner party. Lady Pemberton had entrusted me with her private affairs. Her brow knitted as she allowed her gaze to roam, as if seeking reassurance. Then let us begin by examining the study. Clara, you lead the way, Miss Marple urged, motioning them toward the claustrophobic space that had witnessed the last of Lady Pemberton's life. As they entered the study, the air shifted. Afternoon light had now surrendered to invasive shadows. Torn papers lay scattered across the floor, remnants of Lady Pemberton's final confessions, blurring into the dreariness. Miss Marple examined the half-contorted ledger lying abandoned on the desktop, its open pages revealing hastily scribbled annotations in a hand almost unrecognizable amidst frequent corrections, each ink blot a pulse of pain, of worry. Inspector, would you mind taking a closer look to determine if this records our wayward heir's previous activities? She suggested, nudging the ledger toward him. Indeed, but it seems the task will require more scrutiny than just a glance, Craddock murmured, thumbing through the remaining pages. And yet, just then, Miss Marple felt the chill of something odd. A letter, half hidden, beneath an ornate paperweight. She pulled it out delicately, realizing it was sealed, but bore a familiar emblem, from Ravenswood, Millinery. Mrs. Whitlock again, Clara pressed, peering over her shoulder. But what could her niece want with Lady Pemberton? More gossip. An insistent rapping at the door caught their attention. Inspector Craddock swung it open, revealing an officer with a look of urgency plastered across his face. Sir, we have an update. Another body has been reported outside the grounds. What? This time it was Verity who erupted, confusion caught in surges of rising panic. Just beyond the gates near the driveway, the officer provided, his voice gravelly. A man, sir. Looks like Waverley, Miss Marple whispered under her breath, horrified. The realization grasped around her heart like a vice. Then it stands. Someone has turned art into a far darker abyss than we ever anticipated. Miss Marple stepped forward, determination coursing through her veins like venom. Truth is at stake, but so too is the heart of this family. As they stepped outside into the austere embrace of darkness, Miss Marple's heart raced with the amplitude of uncertainty. Shadows thickened, each step setting off whispers, tiny doubts, coaxing from their hiding places. As they approached the gate where the officer had indicated, the chill of the night seemed to close around them, silencing all but the thrum of their anxious breaths. There, beneath a twisted yew tree, lifeless fingers clutched a sparkling letter in Waverley's grasp, his eyes glazed in a tragic finality. As Miss Marple knelt down, sifting through the evidence of despair and secrets interred, she knew one thing. The divisions within this family ran as deep as blood could seep in darkness, feeding its insidious and chaotic roots. The truth lurked in elusive shadows, but she remained steadfast, a beacon in the ruins of their fractured bonds, compelled to guide them back toward the light. And she hoped against hope that light would reveal the deeper malice lurking behind each facade, a malice that had already claimed one life but threatened to bring the entire family to its knees. Chapter 7. A Whisper from the Dead. The rain pounded down on Pemberton Manor, each drop splattering against the windows like a chorus of anxious whispers. Inside, the pervasive gloom, illuminated only by flickering oil lamps, felt stifling. With the spectre of Waverley's demise fresh on their minds, the gathering held its collective breath, tension lacing every word like a sharpened blade. As Miss Marple entered the drawing room, the shadows of the past clung tightly to the richly panelled walls, reinforcing the weight of grief compounded by uncertainty. Clara Gold stood at the fireplace, her hands twisting nervously around a frayed handkerchief, while Verity Pemberton paced with agitation, her heels clicking on the polished floor. Inspector Craddock, visibly troubled, was poring over scattered correspondence abandoned by Lady Pemberton. He glanced up as Miss Marple approached, his eyes clouded with urgency. "Miss Marple," he said, his voice low and taut, "the storm may have brought forth more than mere rain. It feels as if the walls themselves have secrets that yearn to be unearthed." "I couldn't agree more, Inspector." Miss Marple's gaze drifted to the oak table, cluttered with remnants of Lady Pemberton's life, both frivolous and foreboding. "It seems the very spectre of our departed hostess seeks acknowledgement." Just then, a sudden gust of wind rattled the window panes, causing Clara to jump, and it was in that very moment that a golden glimmer caught Miss Marple's eye, beneath a loose floorboard, almost timidly, as if it wished to remain hidden. "Ah, but what is this?" she murmured, kneeling effortlessly as she pried the board loose with a practiced hand. Not far from the fireplace, Verity paused, her curiosity piqued, leaning in closer to see. "What do you intend to find among the boards of this ancient house?" "Possibly a fragment of our dearly departed's mind," Miss Marple replied, her voice gliding lightly over the tension in the air. With a careful twist of her wrist, she brought forth a small, tattered journal, its leather cover marred by age but steadfast against the fingers of time. "Where it fell from the very soul of this manor," Miss Marple interjected, before declining to elaborate further. Craddock bent down beside her, curiosity igniting in his eyes as the profound weight of the moment seemed to saturate the room with an impending revelation. "Are those her words?" he queried, glancing from the old journal to the storm raging outside. "Then we unearth the confessions of Lady Pemberton herself. We must read it once." As Miss Marple carefully flipped the journal open, the scent of musty paper wafted toward her, mingling with the earthy aroma of rain-soaked walls. The first faint strokes of Lady Pemberton's handwriting greeted them, a fluid penmanship speaking in hushed tones of strife. "Let us listen to what she has claimed," Miss Marple whispered, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Today marks a pivotal day," the journal began. "In the light of token friendships, the shadows creep ever closer. I fear a distance grows between those I once deemed dear. Each guest wears a mask unveiled but momentarily, and yet beneath the silks and cravats lie hearts aching with jealousy, a tree of bitterness bearing fruit to enmity." Miss Marple's heart raced as meanings fogged and yet blossomed. Clara edged closer, peering at the delicate script, whispering as she read. So, she had suspicions. Anxiety lingered in her thoughts. Everyone has their demons, Verity murmured. But how can we interpret her grievances? Miss Marple turned yet another page, treasuring the weight of words as they danced around the delicate webs spun among attendees at that fateful dinner. She mentions Thomas, Mr. Waverley, a name rife with entanglement. Another line caught her attention. I have bequeathed my trust to an artist, not only for his paint, but for the muses that itch beneath his skin. Yet I question whether I have not merely cloaked my own secrets in his artistry. Secrets? Clara's tone climbed in pitch. What secrets could she possibly harbor that would be so dire as to lead me to the brink of revelation? And this, Miss Marple mused quietly, is where correspondence must act as both a companion and a witness. Consider Waverley's art. He paints not only to celebrate, but to encapsulate truths as blood spills onto canvas. As Clara watched with bated breath, Miss Marple turned to yet another page. The trembling of her hands masked the resolve she had witnessed for years at St. Mary Mead as a shuddering pen continued the tale. Samuel Reed is an acquaintance, hidden in pomp but deprived of grace. Together, our past entwines in ways that leave no choice but to settle frontal confrontations. We are two roles at a perilous game, marking the fault lines of ambition. Samuel Reed, Craddock echoed, his brow knitted in concentration. Isn't he the financial advisor to Lady Pemberton? Yes, and perhaps the game of fate's design intertwines more than mere friendship. Waverley could have known of these tumultuous ties. What if he had tried to lay claim to her legacy? Or position himself closer to her estate, Verity argued sharply. If a portrait entangling Lady Pemberton is the object of his desire, embers of her legacy may spark like flames among those who believe to be worthy. Miss Marple felt the strands pulling taut, woven into an enigmatic tapestry of motives cascading beneath the surface of respectable facades. Just then, the inked lines of the journal seized her attention again, revealing a deeper vein of cold truths. As the clock ticks toward midnight, visions of regret surface, a family forged in secrets and shadows. When one treads through old grievances, what rises from the ashes? An ounce of love or a pound of wrath? I cannot trust those once dear, nor can I be assured that my own heart does not carry the stains. Regret threatens betrayal, Miss Marple stated softly, piecing the fragmented puzzle together with incisive precision. And the yearning for power is often cloaked in affection. At that moment, a loud crash echoed from beyond, a desperate thud, breaking the spell like shattering glass, sending tremors through their collective composure. What now? Clara gasped, eyes wide. Stay here, Craddock commanded, already striding purposefully toward the door. I will go investigate. No, Miss Marple interjected, her heart racing. We may step into something far more dangerous than we realize. The hidden animosities we unravel may react like a serpent when cornered. Then what action will we take? Verity pressed. Her voice cracked, entangled in nerves. We will confront what lurks outside that door, Miss Marple declared resolutely, clutching the journal tight against her chest. For it appears Our Lady has not merely whispered from beyond the grave, but has left echoes that will resonate in more than mere words. If truth lies woven in these pages, we stand no chance of unraveling its fabric without first confronting what danger it presents. As the echoes of their resolve shimmered through the atmosphere, Miss Marple stepped forward, and with each step, The grip around her resolve tightened. Before the door swung open entirely, the chapter of the past seemed to congeal into an inescapable present, where every secret cowered in the shadows. As Craddock reached for the doorknob, Miss Marple felt the pulse of anticipation surround them and knew that whatever lay ahead would demand more than mere storytelling. It would require them to reconcile with the ghosts of the past. With a deep breath, they crossed into the uncertain night, haunted and driven by whispers born from the dead, understanding with eerie clarity that the shadows had only just begun to reveal their truth. Chapter 8: The Hidden Room. The storm outside lashed at the manor with a ferocity that echoed the rising tide of anxious anticipation inside. Miss Marple stood in the center of the dimly lit study, a steady flame, flickering in the old brass lamp, casting shadows that danced across the walls like phantoms of the past. A gaping silence enveloped the room, thickened by the very debt of secrets waiting to be uncovered, and it was within that silence that she grasped the essence of despair, lurking among the remnants of Lady Pemberton's life. Just moments before, Inspector Craddock had rushed into the study, his expression taut and grave. Miss Marple, a shudder runs through the manor. The stone juts. No, it trembles. There must be something behind that wall. He pointed toward the far side of the room, where the narrow seams in the paneling seemed to whisper conspiratorial secrets. I believe we can uncover something deeper, possibly hidden from the prying eyes of all who once dwelled here. Miss Marple's heart quickened with the thrill of impending discovery. Perhaps a hidden room, you think? She moved toward the wall, fingers brushing against the wood, feeling its cool surface. There could be letters or artifacts, long forgotten, perhaps even clues regarding Lady Pemberton herself. The inspector nodded, suddenly fervent. Indeed, and uncovering them may lead to the truth that could set this unfortunate family free from its continuous cycle of sorrow. With gusto, Craddock searched the edges of the wall, prodding and inspecting. But Miss Marple held back, letting the tempo of the moment fortify her intuition. She felt the weight of unseen glances converging upon her, the very walls still fidgeting with whispers of lives once vibrantly intertwined. As a hushed urgency enveloped them, the inspector pressed harder against the paneling. Suddenly, a soft click echoed through the room, a sound absurdly out of place amidst the raindrops hammering at the window. A section of the wall gave way, sliding open with an agonizing creak, to unveil a compact chamber cloaked in darkness and sin. "Step back," Craddock ordered, carefully peering into the eerie hole, now laid bare before them. He leaned in, candles flickering as he scrutinized the shadow-clad corners. "What a curiosity! Look at this, Miss Marple. None but the dust of bygone eras has graced this space." With stalwart breath, Miss Marple moved closer, peering into the hidden room that revealed a scattering of artifacts. Tarnished silverware, yellowed letters tied with fading ribbons, and a series of paintings. Not among them Lady Pemberton's esteemed portrait, but rather unrefined and obscured by layers of neglect. "Who would bury such pieces here?" she whispered. "And how might they serve the lineage of Lady Pemberton's past?" A faint rustle interrupted her thoughts as a gust of wind swept through the opening, flaring the candle's flame and revealing something nestled in the dusty corner. An old trunk, locked tight, yet beckoning with possibility. "Look, Inspector." Miss Marple pointed toward it. There, amid the shadows, hide-bound remnants of grief or treasures entwined in deceit. The inspector bent down, squinting at the lock. "Perhaps a key lies somewhere close." a key worth our search. As he inspected the clutter with vigor, Miss Marple knelt beside him, her intuition guiding her toward the letters stacked precariously in the corner, delicate and revealing. Reading these will provide insights, but tell me, Inspector, what shape do you believe the key must encompass? The one who seeks the truth must respond to it, he replied distractedly, teasing through another layer of bric-a-brac. Solid like the permanence of familial ties, it might be scattered among us, buried within the shadows. Indeed, Miss Marple echoed, the words pressing upon her mind like layers of pressing weight. It's akin to how we weave our narratives, told through what we treasure and what we dare to bury. Her fingers grazed one of the letters, slightly unsealed, a tremor of anticipation rippling through her as she lifted it carefully. Wait, there's a name here that might hold significance. She tucked the letter closer to the faint candlelight and felt the rush of clarity that struck her as though a long-buried ember had suddenly ignited. Samuel Reed, she whispered, tracing the name with her finger. The financial advisor, with potential ties to the recent misunderstandings surrounding Lady Pemberton's assets. One would assume he could have gained more than mere interest in the family's affairs. Samuel Reed, Craddock echoed, frowning. He's been mentioned at dinner, a known acquaintance of Lady Pemberton. I remember that name was raised during discussions, but how does this link to Waverley? The bonds of money travel through time, Miss Marple posited, her thoughts racing with deductions. If Reed had wished to cultivate influence over Lady Pemberton's choices, he could quite easily apply pressure, particularly concerning her estate. Her demise perhaps opened doors he had only ever wished to peer through. That could well explain his motives, Craddock said, his tone growing sharp. And urgency may bear influence upon the artist's end. Look beyond the frame. Miss Marple rose, casting a glance toward the afar portrait of Lady Pemberton that hung steadfastly above the mantel, its painted eyes now holding unspoken truths, seeming to know. The artist had painted more than a likeness, she declared, her pulse racing. He encapsulated a sentiment, a burden born, perhaps involving regret or obligation. Could it be that Lady Pemberton saw something she should never have? Then perhaps, Craddock suggested, his brows knit in contemplation as he straightened, we must call upon Reed. He might hold answers to these turbulent conundrums. Just then, the air thickened further with growing apprehension, and without warning, the tall figure of Verity appeared in the doorway, her voice laced with urgency. Have you found anything? The manner, there are whispers. It speaks of things that should not. Whispers? Miss Marple interjected, her mind spinning as she absorbed the unfolding inquiry. Might the whispers surround several parties in mourning? Perhaps it cloaks both treachery and dread. Let's not stew in these riddles. We must confront those who haunt us, Verity retorted, vibrant with a fervor that suggested deeper shadows cloaked her. Truth. Step forth then, Verity, Miss Marple called out sharply, stepping towards her, eyes narrowing. Share what you harbor. These shadows that loom are tight-knit. You must speak, for the living may yet unearth what binds us to the dead. For a heartbeat, silence ensued, heavy and oppressive, until Verity drew a deep breath, her composure wavering, as she spoke with resolute clarity that confirmed Miss Marple's suspicions. There are indeed secrets tied around this house, familiarity stained by deception. I once discovered that life can become unbearably sculptural. But before she could divulge further, a sudden crash from the hidden room caused them all to freeze, hearts racing once more, realizing the pull of curiosity would test their foundations anew. "Did you hear that?" Craddock whispered. It sounded like someone in there. Miss Marple felt a rush of urgency, a clamoring intuition that surged through her like electricity. It's time to confront whatever and whoever lingers within these shadows. With a determined nod, they steeled themselves, Miss Marple clutching the letter bearing Samuel Reed's name tightly against her breast. The confines of the hidden chamber seemed to morph into the brink of uncertainty, drawing them toward the precipice of revelation, while outside, the storm threatened to engulf them all. As the door swung open and the shadows of the hidden room yawned wide, Miss Marple's eyes met those of her companions, each gaze reflecting the depths of unspoken suspicions. What lay before them would either shatter their world or lead them to the heart of Lady Pemberton's chilling truth, a truth that beckoned them deeper into the obscured corners of their very souls. The darkness had never felt so alive, and with bated breath they stepped in, desperate to unravel the mystery that lay within, but equally aware that this journey might demand far more than mere insight to secure freedom from their fateful entanglements. Chapter 9. The Final Trap. Amid the deafening storm that relentlessly ravaged Pemberton Manor, Miss Marple's heart raced with apprehension. Rain hammered against the stately windows, a cacophony that echoed the tempest brewing within the minds of the dinner guests gathered in the opulent dining room. Overhead, thunder growled ominously, as if urging her on with each deep rumble. Seated at the lavishly adorned table, with its crisp white linens and gleaming silverware, were Clara Gold, Verity, Pemberton, Inspector Craddock, and the ever-looming shadows of suspicion. An air of tension sang through the room like an unseen thread, knitting disparate personalities into a tapestry of intrigue. Miss Marple surveyed her companions, each one ensnared in their own webs of secrets and desires. A sudden crash of thunder drew Clara's attention toward the windows, and her voice shook. "Do you think it will ever stop? The manor feels alive with its whispers and wails." "Maybe it knows all our secrets," Verity replied sharply, her gaze flitting uneasily to Miss Marple, who sat calm and observant, a steadying presence amidst chaos. "However, some secrets must come to light." "Precisely," Miss Marple interjected, her tone soothing. "Tonight marks an opportunity, a chance to unveil the truth behind Lady Pemberton's demise and to unmask the hidden motives festering in this very room." Inspector Craddock leaned forward, placing his elbows on the table as he studied Miss Marple with keen interest. "What do you propose, Miss Marple? That we simply sit and eat, while our impassioned guest continues to play ringmaster? A talented murderer is among us, and I fear for each person seated at this table." "Ah, but therein lies our advantage, Inspector," she replied, her eyes sparkling with the thrill of the chase. "We shall create a staged scenario to draw out our quarry. Let our murderer believe they can slip away under the guise of normalcy." "Staged?" Clara repeated incredulously. "You think one of us is responsible for Lady Pemberton's murder?" "Let us not beat about the bush," Miss Marple replied, her gaze darting to the portrait of Lady Pemberton that hung majestically on the wall, as if its painted eyes bore witness to the unfolding drama. "There is a calculated dance of motives here, each step inching us closer to the truth." As if summoned by her words, a gust of wind howled outside, rattling the shutters, and Miss Marple seized the opportunity. "Tonight we will hold a dinner in tribute to Lady Pemberton, and I will unveil her final affairs. In doing so, our murderer may be foolish enough to reveal themselves." This declaration hung in the air, buoyed by both disbelief and intrigue. Clara hesitated, looking at Verity, who in turn mirrored her trepidation. "What do you mean by unveiling her affairs? Are we to air our grievances along with our dinner?" "That is precisely the notion," Miss Marple replied, summoning a smile. "We will dine together to discuss precisely how dear Lady Pemberton's affairs have intertwined with each of our lives. Therein lies the key to unmasking our hidden opponent." Supper was served in less than an hour. Lavish platters adorned with roasted meats, garnished vegetables, and rich buttery sauces, all accompanied by fine wines that flowed like the rain outside. Conversation flared uneasily, and tension crept around the table like a velvet cloak. Over the clatter of silverware and the murmurs of discontent, Miss Marple remained an unyielding presence, keeping her sharp eyes trained on her companions. "Shall we toast to Lady Pemberton?" they murmured, each glass raised, but not without hesitation. "Such a tragic loss indeed," Clara said, her voice sharper than the forks they held. "She deserved loyalty from us all, not whispers of betrayal, hovering like this storm." Miss Marple seized the moment, her mind wrapped in the intricate threads of deceit. "And yet, loyalty often reveals itself in unexpected places. Isn't that so, Verity?" "Of course," Verity returned, her gaze flitting nervously as she stirred her wine. "And perhaps it's simply the fear of truths rising from the depths, much like ghosts." "Indeed," Miss Marple replied, taking a measured sip of her own drink, her mind ablaze with observations. "Or perhaps fear of a reality that lies within the written word," she continued, her thoughts twisting toward the journal and the name that haunted their investigation. "What do you mean?" Craddock asked, leaning in, his eyes narrowing. "As I perused Lady Pemberton's letters, a name lingered. Samuel Reed, a man renowned for straddling the delicate line between advisor and opportunist," she articulated, watching as Clara's expression tightened, a mask slipping. "Does that mean he sought inheritance?" Clara interjected, her unease palpable. "Is that why Lady Pemberton distanced herself from him?" "In part, yes," Miss Marple emphasized. "But motives run thicker than blood. Think not merely of inheritance, but of the manipulations required to achieve it. Attending our gathering is not enough. One requires the mortar to cement their grasp on this estate." "Still, it doesn't incriminate any of us outright," Verity replied, her anxiousness mounting. "Everyone is present, and yet none of us asked for this maelstrom." "True," Miss Marple conceded, "but as we continue to unfold our stories, the nature of betrayal will wield its own revealed truths. If one of you hides in the folds of mistaken loyalty." Before any more could be said, the lights flickered above them, plunging the room into fleeting shadows under the swirling storm. A shared gasp rose amongst them, laughter swirling into the realm of suspicion. "Perhaps the manor wishes to intervene," Clara snipped, her composure waning as the light returned. "But this is no farce. We are perilously close to unraveling a pattern established long before Lady Pemberton took her last breath." "Then let's accelerate our discoveries," Miss Marple implored, grimly lifting her glass, as a shroud of determination wrapped around her. "Let us share the details of our last encounters with her." "I will begin." Their tales fused, weaving through truths and veiled accusations as the heaviness in the air thickened with emotions hidden beneath the surface. Alibis danced, fingers were pointed, and eyes shifted restlessly under the weight of expectation. "I saw Lady Pemberton just before she passed," Clara stated, her voice edging on desperation. There was something rageful, almost, and she mentioned Waverley, speaking of Of what purpose? Verity snapped, her frustrations spilling over. An artist betraying another? One who declared loyalty in front of deductions drawn upon their very breath? What about you, Verity? Miss Marple challenged, her voice low yet firm. Did you not harbour discomfort with Waverley's rise? Lady Pemberton needed him. Verity spat, her spirit igniting with the thrill of confrontation. Next to a man like Thomas, she was vibrant. But the rest of us, we were merely faded characters on her canvas, painted alongside pieces she'd rather forget. Interesting choice of words indeed. Painted to the canvas, Miss Marple noted, pen poised over what she now recognized as more than mere reflections of jealousy. Perhaps such brush strokes bear deeper meanings. There exists a shadow, willing to darken the surface entirely for gain. It could turn brother against brother, art against. She paused, struck by a realization that landed with the weightiest consequence. Outside, rain continued to roar, and a howling wind joined the symphony. The gathered guests, once skeptical, now leaned forward, hearts pounding with the implications of shared shadows. Enough of this, Clara interrupted, her patience withering. If everyone is so desperate to learn of the facts, let us confront who steps forward from these shadows. We must lay bare our hearts. Only that can exorcise the demons that seek to close our fate. At that precise moment, an unexpected rapping echoed through the hall, causing everyone at the table to freeze in their seats. Miss Marple's instincts sharpened like a blade's edge. "Someone's here," she declared, her voice unwavering. Just then, the front door swung open with a loud creak, and out of the storm stepped Samuel Reed, drenched and wild-eyed, gasping as though he had emerged from the very depths of chaos itself. His presence suffused the room with a feral tension, the air heavy with unspoken accusations. "What have you come for?" Verity demanded, an accusation lacing each word like barbs. "Perhaps to lay my burdens down and face the truth," Reed said, shaking off the rain like a creature poised on the edge of revelation. "For I believe I know more than I should about Lady Pemberton's last hours." With those words echoing through the air, Miss Marple felt the frosty fingers of fate tighten into a vice around them. In a single heartbeat, everything shifted. The room crackled with anticipation. The truth was on the cusp of revealing itself. She had positioned herself for this very moment, each guest tethered by the intricacies of guilt. And now, Chapter 10. The truth buried in the garden. The thrum of raindrops danced like hurried whispers against the window panes of Pemberton Manor, blending into a symphony of unease that loomed over the estate. Outside the gardens, the once vibrant heart of Lady Pemberton's legacy, lay drenched in shadows, obscured beneath murky puddles of almost otherworldly character. Miss Jane Marple peered out across the grounds, heavy with the weight of secrets, and felt a pang of melancholy grip her heart. Despite the floral blooms that adorned and colored the garden, she sensed the deeper truth, lurking beneath the surface, veiled yet powerfully poignant. "Miss Marple," Clara Gould's voice broke the fading lull of her thoughts as she stepped tentatively into the room, her pale complexion dimmed by the relentless rain outside. Shall we proceed? There's little time left before the shadows consume it all." Miss Marple turned, the flickering candlelight softening the creases on her weathered face. "Indeed, my dear. The garden beckons us now more than ever. Yesterday's terrors have bled into today's promise. We must unearth the truths and lingering ghosts before they slip beyond our grasp." Clara shuffled, visibly anxious, her hands twisting the damp folds of her shawl. But what if there is nothing to find? What if it is folly to delve deeper? Miss Marple stepped closer, her eyes steady and resolute. My dear Clara, sometimes the very act of searching unveils more than mere answers. It reveals the intricate layers of our souls, as well as the relationships we forfeit in fear of the truth. Without another word, the two women turned and made their way to the garden, the soft crunch of gravel underfoot punctuating their steps. Once the pride of Lady Pemberton, now the garden seemed to mourn its brilliant past. Patches of vibrant roses clung defiantly to life, their colors muted in the pallor of a stormy day, while darker hues consumed the ground, as if nature, its own arbiter, had cast judgment. Inspector Craddock was already there, kneeling in the damp earth beside a withered patch of lavender that swayed in the unrelenting wind. Miss Marple, he called, his voice brimming with urgency. I believe we may have found something. As they approached, Miss Marple squinted, noticing a faint outline in the soil that seemed awry, as though the verdant tapestry had concealed a small excavation. What do you have, Inspector? He gestured toward the disturbing depression in the earth, a freshly turned patch that led them back toward a forgotten time. There's an unsettling difference in the earth, as if it's been disturbed recently. Miss Marple knelt beside him gingerly, her keen eyes assessing the sight before her. Goodness me, my instinct holds true. The garden retains more than mere flora. We must dig deeper. Clara watched their operation unfold, a fidgety unease settling within her. Surely whatever lies beneath might only bring dark revelations. Perhaps it is best to leave the past buried. Ah, but the past often bears a heavy burden, my dear, Miss Marple responded in a voice laced with conviction. It merely requires our understanding. Inspector, we must see what's encased here. With surprising dexterity, Craddock produced a small trowel from his coat pocket and began to unearth the disturbed soil. Each scoop flew from the ground, revealing soil as dark as sorrow and roots tangled like the intricacies of their investigation. Miss Marple assisted, her delicate fingers nudging earth and debris aside, when suddenly her hand struck something smooth and solid. What is it? Clara peered closer, the spark of alarm flashing in her eyes, uncertainty clashing with curiosity. A box, Miss Marple muttered, pulling the object free from its earthen prison and holding it aloft. The small wooden chest bore the markings of time, its surface adorned with the intricacies of craftsmanship, albeit mottled by years of neglect. And one so delicately crafted should hold something of importance. With clarity, Miss Marple eyed the box and its rusted latch, testing it with her nimble fingers. It seems fate has assisted us. Let us see what treasures lie within. The latch groaned in protest as it yielded to Miss Marple's gentle ministrations. With a soft click, the box sprang open, unveiling a trove of yellowed letters neatly arranged. Their surfaces bore flourishes of ink, a hand recognizable as Lady Pemberton's. Lady Pemberton, Clara whispered, her curiosity now overwhelming the initial trepidation. What could possibly lie among her discarded words? Words not discarded, Clara, Miss Marple corrected softly, extracting one near the top. Merely buried out of sight, just as we have done with our unresolved sentiments. Let's see what Lady Pemberton wished to preserve. As she unfolded the letter, the scent of musty paper wafted gently into the moist air. Dearest Samuel, she read aloud, our dealings continue to thrive, yet I implore you, if there exists a fraction of earnestness in our bond, truth must take precedence over our previous arrangements. I fear exposure from the past may undo us both, and entwine us into a web of darkness. The rain intensified, pouring like the weight of might-be truths as they absorbed the implications of Lady Pemberton's words. Clara shifted restlessly, eyes darting in search of invisible assailants. What do you suppose she meant? Samuel Reed, Miss Marple breathed, comprehension coiling around her mind with chilling clarity. His grasp was more than administrative. It ventured into entangled feelings, emotions that left shadows over familial ties. Then he was not simply an advisor, Craddock concluded solemnly, but a man deeply intertwined with her world. Perhaps he knew more than we suspected. Ah, yes, but knowledge is a weapon carded both ways, Miss Marple replied, her pragmatic observation laced with an ominous echo. He had much to gain, should calamity befall Lady Pemberton. The storm outside has taken on a new urgency, wouldn't you say? With determined precision, Miss Marple sifted through the remaining letters, her eyes sparkling as they fell to pieces of correspondence tied with faded ribbons, not simply from Lady Pemberton, but from other names that rang faintly in her memory. These speak of meetings and arrangements with notable guests, threats concealed in cordial exchanges. Did Lady Pemberton threaten them? Clara piped up, confusion lacing her tone. Were they desperate? No, Miss Marple replied, shaking her head gently. She may have feared their responses. A game of chess required stronger moves than only threatening letters. A sharp noise, like the crack of thunder, shook the very soil around them, and that moment felt more alive than death itself, spurring them into frantic determination. The storm was but a reflection of emotions too long buried. We must face the heart of this web head-on, she asserted, feeling the undeniable pull to seek answers before the dawn unfurled beneath a shroud of darkness. But before they could brace themselves for the next steps, a shadow loomed in the garden, cutting through the downpour with chilling realization. A figure emerged, the stark silhouette of none other than Verity Pemberton, her form stark against the swollen clouds, eyes burning with urgent clarity. "Stop," she called, her voice rising above the storm. "You've disturbed things that were meant to stay hidden. Whatever you find could ruin us all." Miss Marple froze, pulse quickening, with the letters clutched tightly in hand. "What do you know, Verity?" Her voice rang out as the rain poured, unstoppable, swirling around them like an indifferent audience to their turmoil. "The past is rattling its chains. It's alive in these very grounds. Tell us what you fear." "I fear," Verity gasped, arms raised, trembling against the onslaught of chaos, "that some truths should remain buried. You can't comprehend. What you're meddling with, Miss Marple. You must stop digging before it's too late." The ominous warning hung heavy in the air, electrifying uncertainty sparking among them. And with dawn looming much too close, Miss Marple sensed peril edging closer, knowing that whatever lay underneath this garden would demand answers, truths that threatened to unleash an inescapable storm. As the thunder roared overhead, Miss Marple's resolved gaze met Verity's, filled with both warning and unexpected raw emotion, leaving the air thick with looming tension, a foreboding of secrets so profound they could unravel everything. What had they uncovered in this garden of shadows? The truth was buried alongside bonds of blood, and they were unprepared for the tide it would surely unleash. Chapter 11. The Confession. No one heard. The rain lashed against the stone facade of Pemberton Manor, drumming like anxious hearts, eager to spill secrets that lingered within. A darkness unfurled outside, wind-whipped and tempest-tossed, casting eerie shadows within the grand dining room where the remaining guests of Lady Pemberton's ill-fated dinner now congregated. The air felt heavy with unsaid words, unprocessed grief. A coiling tension wound tighter with every tick of the ornate clock hanging solemnly above the fireplace. It was in this charged atmosphere that Miss Marple stood, hands clasped thoughtfully over her lap, absorbing the emotional undercurrents swirling like the storm beyond the walls. Beside her, Inspector Craddock could hardly conceal his impatience. "We must summon the courage to deliberate, Miss Marple. Time is a luxury we can ill afford." His voice wavered between frustration and disbelief. He, too, felt the urgency pulsating around them. The dining room was a tableau of clearly defined personas, each one veiled in layers of duplicity. Clara Gold sat curled in a velvet chair, her complexion pale against the rich mahogany, while Verity Pemberton paced restlessly behind her, head bowed as she repeatedly traced the outline of the family crest on the back of her chair. The inspector glanced apprehensively toward the others. Mrs. Claridge clutched her pearls, visibly distressed, and Mr. Thomas Waverley, the artist, appeared mute in his corner. "Such grief," Clara murmured at last, her voice raw. "How can we even discuss what could lead to something so horrid?" "Perhaps the confessional is a true path toward unraveling these tangled loyalties," Miss Marple suggested gently, her gaze piercing through the veil of their defenses. "But we must prepare ourselves for truths that echo darker than we could foresee." "What truths do you speak of, Miss Marple?" Verity interjected, motioning with a flair that was as anxious as it was dismissive. "Do you simply wish to draw blood from our wounds?" "Not blood," Miss Marple replied smoothly, her voice unwavering. "But perhaps rather the pulse of honesty buried amidst these very walls. Secrets are akin to flowers buried in autumn. They await their due season. Are you aware of the dry whispers that surround us?" Before anyone could respond, the door swung open, drenched in rainwater, and from it stepped the figure of Samuel Reed, soaked through, but determined. The somber atmosphere shifted palpably around him, and every eye turned, the weight of accusations pooling thickly. "I need to speak," he stated, voice hoarse, yet embodying an unyielding resolve. "About Lady Pemberton's affairs, about what motivates a man to act." Craddock stepped forward, blending authority with wariness. "And what might that be? We are not likely to indulge in further pretenses, Mr. Reed." "I have kept my mouth shut for too long," Reed declared, eyes darting around the room, gauging their reactions. "I watched as Lady Pemberton became overwhelmed by debts and dealings that darkened her soul." The revelation sent a ripple of tension through the assembled guests, but rather than shock, a mood of suspicion loomed thickly between them, like fog rolling over the moors. "What sort of dealings?" Clara's voice barely held steady, yet curiosity crept in. "Her will," Reed replied, his tone carrying an urgency that tethered the group together. It contained stipulations regarding investment in ventures that veered dangerously close to failure. "I was compelled to intervene, for I feared ruin, not merely of her estate, but of our very dealings in life." He paused and seemed to gather strength. "There were secrets, ones that bound us and threatened to unravel at any instance if they came to light." "And did you tell her this?" Waverley's voice spoke up from his corner, filled with a mix of accusation and disbelief. "Or were you too busy spinning your webs of power?" "You misunderstand," Reed said, throwing a weary hand in Waverley's direction. "I was her confidant, and yet her puppet. My attention on her riches could also mean my downfall. I knew, as did she, the net of deception was closing tightly. Miss Marple shifted in her seat, keenly observant. "But your vulnerabilities cut deeper, Mr. Reed. Only an exposed conscience, flayed raw and painfully aware of its shame, can drive a man, such as you, to this brink. What motives shroud your heart?" He leaned in closer, finally revealing a softer part of himself with a newfound urgency. For Lady Pemberton was not merely a client, nor was she a distant friend. Her very presence breathed life into my ambitions. But with debts came desperate measures and hidden betrayals that I could not bear. She confided something dreadful, a suitor from times past, someone who believed they possessed rights to her existence. I feel as though I drove her away from me, and for that Enough, Clara snapped, the simmering tension boiling over. "You dare throw shadows over what honor remains? You should tremble at placing blame when it may be your conscience that closely mirrors anguish." The room fell silent, each person seemingly grappling with their own truths. Miss Marple, however, felt the shift within. The palpable veils between truths and lies knitted tighter within the recesses of the room, like gossamer threads, rendering them all vulnerable. "Did you witness these dealings firsthand, Samuel?" she asked directly, her insight penetrating the fog, enveloping them. "The suitor she spoke of?" "I did," he admitted reluctantly, "but I cannot utter the name, nor can I bear that weight. It was the presence of more than mere finances. It was power intertwined with the lives buried beneath." Miss Marple's sharp eyes narrowed, focusing on him. "Then, was it shame for your past actions, Mr. Reed, that led you to consider a desperate measure? A hand to fill control through blood when only words would suffice?" His silence spoke volumes. In that moment of stillness, the walls of suspicion cracked, allowing the currents to flow freely. "Why did you not protect her?" Waverley interjected sharply, leaning forward, almost menacing, in his urgency. "What kept you a bystander when Lady Pemberton's life dangled precariously?" "I was scared. A man like me, bequeathed to one as grand as she, would imply treachery against the very family I held dear." Reed replied, his voice thick with emotion, the confession forming a spectral chill within the room. As the group stirred uneasily, Miss Marple seized the moment, her intuition honing in on the revelation. "Ah, but it seems you were not alone in fostering accounts that circle back to her demise. If another sought gain, they too held their shadows at bay." Craddock clenched his jaw, taking the opportunity to intervene. "Then perhaps that other's name lies beneath, waiting to unearth its truth. Shall we have it?" Suddenly the old clock on the mantel chimed, the sound resonating throughout the tense space, marking the dawning of an urgency that seemed to thrive in the air. A collective breath was held as the assembled guests, tethered by their burdens, leaned into the moment before the swell of revelations unfolded. But before Miss Marple could delve further, before she could shape the questions of conscience into actionable insights or the return to dire consequences, a creeping realization washed over her. The corner of the panel beside her trembled subtly, a whisper of movement between the storm's roaring. Something felt amiss. Sensing her unease, Clara turned toward the woodwork, her eyes widening. "Did anyone hear that?" she asked nervously, glancing around. Before a reply could form, the wall behind Miss Marple shuddered, the panel giving way with a low groan, opening up to a hidden space that had remained undetected until now. Gasps erupted around the room, surprise rife as shadows flickered. Miss Marple stepped cautiously closer, unable to shake the sense that the truth waited just within reach. A concealed compartment held an object wrapped in an old cloth, a ledger that could unravel every thread they frayed and make sense of the confessions bubbling to the surface. Her heart raced as she realized this was the revelation, the confirmation of everything they'd skirted around. Cautiously now, bring it forth, Inspector Craddock urged, the atmosphere trembling with anticipation. As if all twisted upon themselves to intertwine fate, Miss Marple held the ledger in her hands, feeling the weight of unspooled lives upon it. In that moment, the room stood suspended in time, heavy with secrets yet to spill and shadows desperate for revelation. The truth awaited. Secrets clamored for release, and with the storm enshrouding them, the next chapter beckoned, a faithless embrace of redemptive history that would not remain shrouded for long. Chapter 12. The Secret Beneath the Staircase. The rain lashed against the windows with a fervor that matched the chaotic tableau unfolding within the dim confines of Pemberton Manor. Thunder boomed overhead, reverberating through the creaking walls as Miss Marple crouched over a hidden compartment, her heart racing not only from the adrenaline of discovery, but from the weight of the truth that teased at the edges of her consciousness. The ledger she clutched bore the weight of lives entwined with Lady Pemberton's fate, and as she carefully pried it open, a chill crept along her spine. What have we unearthed this time? Clara Gould's voice trembled, a mixture of curiosity and dread underscoring her inquiry. Behind her, Verity Pemberton leaned closer, her facade of composure slipping as the potential revelations within the ledger emerged. This ledger may serve as the bridge between Lady Pemberton's life and her untimely death, Miss Marple replied, fingers tracing the delicate handwriting upon the very first page. It bears her unmistakable hand, dated just days before her death, alongside meticulous accounts of guests, her artworks, and names. Verity interrupted, her interest piqued. Did she record names? Indeed, Miss Marple noted, scanning the entries. But more intriguing than the list are the financial transactions crossing over into suspicious territory. Payments to none other than Samuel Reed, alongside sporadic amounts sent to a figure distantly known. It seems her inner circle thrived not merely on love. There was a vast array of concern for wealth and entitlement. Clara furrowed her brow. Wealth? What let her so readily expose herself posthumously? The truth, it seems, demanded recognition, Miss Marple observed carefully, her mind spinning with implications. And as we unearth each layer, the question must arise: who exactly may inherit not only her estate, but the very shadow of her existence? Just then, the distant sound of a creaking floorboard echoed within the room, a low whisper that skated across the surface of tension enveloping them. The shadows danced, as if the manor itself wished to warn them. Miss Marple, what do we do? Verity's voice quivered under the weight of their revelations, her eyes darting back and forth, as though eyes were spying from the very walls. Perhaps, Miss Marple began, her voice calm, yet laden with unyielding resolve. We must descend to where we have only gone in our minds thus far. The secret beneath the staircase. An electric charge rippled through the room at her words, the revelation hanging like fog around them. To the staircase, Clara echoed, eyes widening. But what lies there? Surely we've unearthed enough. We spoke of shadows, Miss Marple asserted, her determination sharpening with purpose. And the shadows of this manor seem to cling tightly to the secrets they house. If Lady Pemberton harbored fear regarding financial entanglements. These secrets could very well dry up her fountain of trust. With a shared glance, the necessity of action transpired among them. The three women moved toward the grand staircase, its ornately carved banister punctuated with years of elegance and echoes of laughter now hushed by dread. Miss Marple's keen eye caught every bruise on the wood, every faded accent on the floorboards. "It was here," she said, kneeling on the bottom step, fingers brushing against its surface, "that an echo of desperation lingers, a yearning to conceal." Reaching behind the dusty spindles, she felt the weight of something unnatural. With a gentle shove, loose steps creaked, revealing a sliver of light between hidden compartments. "Let's pry further. Our answers reside beneath us, waiting to be awakened." They worked together, stripping away dust and grime that clung stubbornly to the secrets ensconced deep within. With an effort born of curiosity and fear, the hidden latch released with a sudden pop, revealing a compartment beneath the staircase that contained a small, worn leather box. "What is that?" Clara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Miss Marple lifted it cautiously, unsure of what secrets it might unfurl. The final pieces of a puzzle, a relic that could contain the answers lying in wait. Should we not bring brooding spirits into the light? Hesitant hands opened the box, revealing not only letters, but also a single photograph, much larger than a standard portrait, and faded by time. Miss Marple's breath caught as she lifted it closer, recognizing the faces captured within the frame. A bygone gathering of Lady Pemberton in easy laughter, flanked by none other than Samuel Reed, and what looked suspiciously like Thomas Waverley. Both men masked with frivolity, yet reflecting their ambitions in the subtleties of their expressions. What were they plotting? Verity's eyes narrowed, a mix of uncertainty and incredulity melding as she studied the photograph. Lady Pemberton's light concealed a darker foundation. The smiles betray nothing more than kinships built on fragile soils, Miss Marple concluded. If these documents contain the essence of her dealings, then they extend beyond money. They encompass desires, emotions, venal layers, binding them tightly. "What are you positing?" Clara pressed, a tremor in her tone, as shadows crowded closer. Lady Pemberton's demise might not merely stem from ambition, but a betrayal that gripped all vested entities. "Precisely." Miss Marple's voice resonated in the silenced room. Betrayal from those she trusted most. And the figures surrounding her were driven more than simply by avarice. They stewed within emotional chambers, jealous hearts, capable of seizing the keys to legacies. What emotion? Clara hesitated, struggling against the rising tide of tension. A revelation lurking just beyond the horizon. The money was theirs, would it not be? But it was about more than money, Miss Marple insisted. There were layers intended to protect the facade of relationships, ones tailored to dissolve under scrutiny. Theft of affections cloaked in sentiment, threats delivering wounds that time had yet to heal. As if in answer to her words, a distant sound echoed through the manor, a creaking door, an echo slipping through the air, like the tide of memories resurfacing. Waverley's voice suddenly interjected from the shadows, dragging them back into reality. "What is this? Secrets now bared beneath the staircase, in a house where shadows mingle with the light?" Immediately Clara stepped back, her instincts screaming as the tensions soared among them. "And you, Waverley, did you seek to silence the echoes of Lady Pemberton's fall?" "Silence," he echoed, his voice filled with suspicion and urgency. "I sought truth, not concealed it. You form accusations around motions never implied. I lost a muse that suffocated beauty with dread. A performance wrapped in self-preservation, Miss Marple observed, her calm steadiness unnerving in the face of growing uncertainty. But perhaps it has tangled tighter than we all imagined. There, among the petals and despair, lies an eloquent record of our interconnected anguish. Have you forgotten your own hand at her art's suffocated? Waverley's expression morphed, a shadow clouding over brows that had offered nothing but privilege moments before. I was a connection, as much as a chain, he hissed, voice trembling slightly. Was that all it took to grasp her heart? Amid the clamour rising within them, Miss Marple felt it, a final thread, slipping towards the edge of revelation, a truth now weaving itself tightly around them, threatening to spring forth and engulf the hearts of the disillusioned. A storm raged on outside, the winds howling as if heralding either disaster or metamorphosis. As the shadows lengthened, so did the time, choking the conversations with their heavy truths. Miss Marple stepped forward, her mind crystal clear amid the chaos that clung like a fog around them, all tumbling circuits finally aligning. I suspect these murky waters may reveal much more than meets the eye. This picture and these letters unveil motives that reside not only in monetary realms, but in tangled passions, a dance between loyalty and betrayal. A love wrapped dangerously close to the knife's edge, she declared, her voice steadying with the depth of their collective experiences now unfolding. With her next word poised on her tongue, the door swung open suddenly, and a chilling gust rifled through the space, drawing all thoughts to a silence, as a whisper declared, "The truth lies just beneath the stairs." In that moment, Miss Marple knew. Her pulse quickened, breath staticky, as revelation coursed through the manicured illusions of Pemberton Manor. The key, unfurling truths soaked in shadows, awaited not merely in these letters, but transcended into the very souls of those clinging to the weight of hidden identities. The culmination had arrived. She turned toward the faces before her, identical strands of unresolved narratives threading through the very fabric of their lives. We have not merely challenged the darkness, we've waded into it, each hand clinging to equal parts grief and blood. It is time to confront the love, but also the greedy snare within our depths as we race toward closure. The rain fell harder, pounding against the manor like a race of time, pushing toward a foreboding conclusion, and Miss Marple's own heart raced as she realized they were ever closer to unraveling the very truth that united and devoured them all, a truth that